Velvet. I'm a mom of a student at Oakwood. I want to add Happy Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Month as well. I didn't hear that one. But that's not why I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the armed guards issue, which I've spoken about before, which I noticed it was referred to as enhanced security now. Is it okay to ask a follow-up question about the budget? Because I didn't think of it at the time.
Sure, yeah.
So I know that 2 years ago, it was $750,000 for the armed security. Is that still the same amount, or is it different now?
Dr. Delia?
And is it the same company and everything as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. The policy, as you know, it was, I refer to it as the armed gunman policy. It was implemented in 2023. Protecting our children's all of our top priority, and it's an emotional issue. I truly appreciate the district's efforts to keep our children safe. But based on analyzing evidence available and continuing to read new research, I still feel that armed guards are security theater and an expensive, unjustified measure. One large-scale study of school shootings that occurred within a decades-long span proved that casualties were almost 3 times as likely when armed security was present. A limitation of that study was that it could not account for shootings that may have been deterred by the presence of guards, but research also shows that psychologically, school shooters are typically suicidal and seeking confrontation, thereby making schools with armed guards better targets for them. The most high-profile shooting events of the last decade, like Parkland, Uvalde, Las Vegas, all had armed police present. And another study published by Harvard found that in 14,000 crimes in which a victim was present, just under 1% involved a gun used in self-defense. On the contrary, recent research on school safety has shown that the most effective measures are often inexpensive, common sense ones, like locking school doors, clear security plans and communication, panic buttons, de-escalation training, protocols for recognizing and reporting students exhibiting red flags and warning signs, positive school cultures, and ample social resources for students and families. And while some may like the idea of school guards, that preference is not rooted in science, and research also shows that there are racial and class divides with how police on school grounds are perceived. The community was never surveyed about this issue, like some other nearby school districts did, so we don't have any data about that here. I think it would be helpful and reassuring if the board were able to present any evidence at all showing that safety is improved with armed guards. And I also think it would be respectful to include families and communities in future decisions to maintain this program, especially at a time when money is needed for the portables because it's a fiscal issue, but also because there are real tangible risks involved for the community when police are invited on school grounds. One researcher pointed out that the very presence of police changes a school from a place of learning to a place of surveillance. I find this point about surveillance particularly disturbing at a time when ICE has been rounding up immigrants in communities across the US, leading to the deportation of US citizens without due process. And my fears about this are not baseless, because in 2018, a student named Alex in Huntington School District was deported due to a school police officer reporting him to ICE under the mistaken assumption that he was involved in gang activity. This makes sense because research on police in schools frequently warns that when student discipline matters become police matters, school personnel are then rendered helpless to intervene. This was the case with Alex, and it was the case for recent student deportations in this country as well, such as Sackett's Harbor, New York, where the family was only returned when the state intervened. I thank you, Dr. Delia, for sharing the New York State guidance about the rights of immigrant students earlier this school year. But I want to know, as an immigrant mother concerned for my community and fellow immigrants, have these armed gunmen, former police officers, been trained on that document?
First, the document was submitted to everybody, so I can, assure you that they were, and they're not having contact with students though as well. So they're not, and they haven't had any as over the past 2.5 years. They do not have student contact.
Okay, so I know there's like 3 types of documentation that they need to show if they're allowing people on school grounds. Like, has that been discussed in a meeting with them?
Are you referring to if the potential?
Yes, it's the same immigrants' rights.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm answering your question.
But I didn't finish my question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Are you answering if ICE shows up on school grounds as far as the documentation?
Yes, it's
Yes,
a
there
follow-up
are.
to my earlier question.
There are protocols that the principals have in place that we followed, that we've been in close consultation with our legal team and exactly how it will be.
But I'm asking if the armed security members were briefed on that, if they had a meeting about this document, or if they just received it, or do they specifically know what documentation is needed?
Well, they're not part of that, the armed security guards. If ICE is showing up, it is the building principal that is involved with it.
But can you ensure us that they would not speak to an ICE officer in not in uniform who appears on school grounds?
They're not speaking with ICE officers, our armed security. That's not the purpose of them
What
being
is
there.
what is the rule regarding that for them exactly?
Well, that I just said they're not speaking with them.
So they know they're not allowed to speak to, like, if a stranger showed up, wouldn't they speak to them, or they wouldn't? They would report it to someone else.
No, we also have additional security on grounds as well.
Okay.
Not everybody's armed.
So you said that they're not allowed to talk to students. I wanted to also know, where are they exactly permitted on campus? Because I know they're allowed in cars, but they're not supposed to enter the building. Are they allowed to enter the building to use the bathroom? Or is there any circumstance in which they would be allowed to enter the building?
They're not entering the building, and they do not use our bathrooms in the building.
Okay. And they're not allowed to speak to students as well, right? Okay. Are they also aware that they're not allowed to question students on citizenship status or disclose any information about students?
Absolutely.
Okay. I also wanted to know, will you be assessing or evaluating? Sorry? Oh, okay. Will you be assessing or evaluating the efficacy and public reception of the armed security policy at any time soon? Or is it going to just continue without any further review of it?
That would be a board matter. You know, we review all of our policies from time to time, and I believe we've brought in New York State school boards, you know, because we have to update our policy manual. So, you know, we'll be updating our policy manual. You know, I don't know whether this policy would come up for review again. I doubt it because we just adopted it. So, but
I'm wondering if anyone else on the board has any thoughts about that. If they think it's worthy of something being under review, or a committee, perhaps like the UPK committee that the community could be a part of.
I don't see an interest to revisit the issue that we just implemented last year.
Okay, because that was my last question, was just about if there was a committee. I think that would be, you know, very valuable to the community, and I would definitely want to volunteer to be a part of that.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind if there was one. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else want to address the board? No? Going once? Twice? Okay, with that, I will take a motion to